London, where are you? Hello! Woo! And welcome friends to episode 51 of Scott Free Running. Join me today as I talk all things marathon, past, future and present. So for today's video, I would love to recap on my last 3 marathons. So I ran my first marathon back in April of this year. I ran the Brighton Marathon in the UK in a time of 3 hours and 45 seconds. Not at all bad for my debut marathon. I was absolutely over the moon with it. Here I am on screen, approaching the finish line, and oh, what an amazing feeling that was to be out on the streets that day. I went into this race with a goal of sub 250, but I quickly realised in the latter stages of that marathon that I was a little way away from sub 250 fitness at that moment in time. So skipping on 5 months later, I had the pleasure of running the Adelaide Marathon here in South Australia. The day didn't go smoothly at all, but I came in with a time of 2 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. Very close to not reaching my A goal for the day, which was a sub 3 hour marathon, but I just about did it. My most recent marathon, and probably my favourite marathon experience to date, came just 10 days ago from the time of making this video, and that was the Melbourne Marathon, which happened very early October of this year. So just within that 6-month window of my first marathon, that was the Melbourne Marathon that I ran in a time of 2 hours, 58 minutes and 55 seconds. So a little bit more comfortably under that 3 hour or sub 3 hour goal, I should say, and absolutely over the moon, as I have been finishing the last 3 marathons. But to put it lightly, my marathon experience, or at least my marathon career, hasn't been without ups and downs, and admittedly I've made a few mistakes along the way. The old saying, don't change anything on race day, has been something that I seem to forget every time I wake up on race day with the nerves in my belly and just think, oh, maybe I'll try this, forgetting that actually you should stick to the tried and tested methods that you built up throughout your training. All of those things that you've rehearsed, you do that for a reason, and it's really smart, you know, to actually just be strict with yourself and to play by the rules. But with that being said, I, from these 3 experiences, would like to give you guys a run through of everything I've learned. Hopefully there's an opportunity for you guys to take something away from this video. If there is anything at all, please consider leaving a like down below, and please subscribe if you haven't already. So let's get into it, starting with just how I'm approaching each marathon. And let's talk about race strategy. So starting off with Brighton back in April, I had the A goal of running a sub 250 in this race, with the B goal of running a sub 3 hour marathon, and the C goal of finishing. I'm pleased to say that I did meet my C goal on the day, but I missed my A and B. And really, my estimation of running a sub 250 marathon was probably optimistic from the start, to be honest. I did have a whole lot of running experience, or at least longer running experience. Anything over that 20-mile mark I hadn't experienced prior to starting this training vlog. So sub 250 probably was out of my grasp to begin with. But I tried anyway, and I persevered with the training all through about 10 weeks of training leading up to Brighton. And I realised, as I said in the intro later on in the race, that I just didn't have the fitness for that sub 250 yet. But I will say that the day itself, even though I was excited on the start line, I had all the goosebumps and I had the hair standing up, as you would probably imagine in your marathon debut. I'm really happy that I actually held back on the gas a little bit at the start, and I was able to run a fairly conservative effort, albeit slightly ahead of my fitness potential. So I'll put that graph up on screen now from Brighton. So I ran quite a conservative effort, as I said, but looking back, it was probably just a little bit too heavy on the gas. So comparing the splits on screen to the Adelaide Marathon, and really when I was plotting these splits, I was really pleased to see that actually there's not a whole lot of difference. I ran the first half of the Adelaide Marathon with the 3-hour pacer on the day, and yeah, it was quite a conservative, quite a, I guess, nicely sustained effort. That was until I had a bit of an issue at halfway. There was just some GI issues on the day that just weren't sitting right, and I had to use the bathroom, which cost me just over a minute. And my second half of my marathon was substantially, I guess, more sporadic. I definitely started off that second half just trying to play catch up on the time I'd lost, which unfortunately did cost me. I would have been a lot better by actually slowing right down to just above marathon pace, and just gradually catching my pace group after, I don't know, 7 or 8k, and not the 3 or 4k that I caught them in. That was just far too fast. But again, comparing those two splits from Brighton to Adelaide, really happy to see that the times are almost identical, just until we get to 35k. Pretty much bang on, but I know that in Adelaide I just had so much more in the bank. In Brighton, by this point, I had absolutely fallen off the rails. This was over 20 miles into the event, and I was just an absolute mess. I had nothing but tears streaming down my face, and my legs were absolutely gone. I was crawling, and there were so many lessons that I learned from Brighton. But you know what, looking back at the splits, I'm so happy to see that I did just stick it out, and I very nearly didn't finish the event, if I'm quite honest. 5 months later in Adelaide, looking at the splits, I know how much better I felt, and without those GI issues, I'm quite confident that actually I could have, you know, really dipped under that sub 3-hour goal nicely. But with the toilet break on the day and me playing catch up, you know, putting in fast Ks back to back, I knew that that wasn't going to help me in the long run. So moving forward to Melbourne, which was just 6 weeks after that Adelaide Marathon, as I mentioned. Melbourne was a bit of a last minute marathon for me. I actually only entered about 2 weeks prior, and in many ways I thought that the season had ended for me, and then I saw that the entries were still open and we had a free weekend, so I thought, why not fly into Melbourne, catch up with some friends and run the marathon. And it was only in the week leading up to Melbourne that I thought, actually, I think I could give this a good crack. I'm not sure my legs are in optimum condition. I'm not sure that they've healed, you know, completely 100% from Adelaide. I'd also run a half marathon race just a couple of weeks prior, but I thought, let's give it a good shot. And I turned up in Melbourne, and as you guys know that have watched my Melbourne marathon videos, part 1 and 2, you'll know that that day was a huge success. I didn't have any overall issues on the day. I just had a little bit of mental fatigue. I was quite tired, to be honest. Like, my motivation had really suffered, and you know, I think I can't take anything away from my performance on that day, because I came in with a new PB by about a minute, and I just, yeah, I'm so stoked on how that race went. And quite honestly, I learned so much from that race in Melbourne. There's a massive piece here on don't change things that aren't broken. I really just went into Melbourne with sort of fresh eyes. I think I'd thought so much about the Adelaide Marathon after Brighton not going so well, and you know, having 5 months to think about the next race. I really thought so much about Adelaide, what I'd be wearing, how often I'd be taking my gels. All of this had been rehearsed, and I turned up to Adelaide just knowing through and through my plan, what I was going to be doing, why I'd chosen, you know, the shorts, etc. that I was using. They were split shorts that I used on the day. I was really confident going into the race. Whereas in Melbourne, there was just a little bit of me that I think maybe had switched off. I thought it was off season for me, so I didn't really take the preparation as seriously as I should have. So I turned up to Melbourne and decided on the day to run in a pair of half tights that I'd never run a marathon in before, or at least a long run. then they were great. Don't get me wrong, they were great throughout training, and I really enjoyed that I could stash loads of gels in my pockets. But quite honestly, I hadn't practiced with them sitting around my waistband, and actually they caused me a lot of discomfort quite early on into the race, just because they were pushing against my belly. And as I'm taking in water, taking in gels, I just didn't expect the sort of cramps that those shorts were going to give me by pushing around my waist. I did find later on in the race that actually just by adjusting my waistband I got so much relief, but it's great to know for future that actually sort of loose split shorts are much better for me personally during marathons. But again, this is just a last minute decision I made to wear the half tights, and I'm pleased I did, because I won't be doing that anytime soon. It's similarly in Brighton, I wore a hydration vest around my chest. Underneath my vest I had a short vest that had a Salomon water bottle in it. It had gels on the front, and I believe a caffeine gel in the back, as well as a salt tablet. And I'm not sure how I thought I was going to take this salt tablet on. It needed to be dissolved in water, but on the day I thought if I kit myself out with hydration, nutrition, salts, I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to run into any issues. But actually, this completely just chafed and was a horrible feeling from the start. As soon as I went to the first water station, I drank a cup of water and I threw one over my head just to cool myself down, but immediately this caused the hydration vest to chafe. I'm not sure why I put this vest on underneath my vest on the day. I was actually planning to wear it over the top. I knew it wasn't ideal, but I practiced this in training and it worked quite well. But just for whatever reason, on the day of the morning of the marathon, I just thought, let's just put it on underneath my vest and see what happens. Terrible idea. Again, going back to don't try new things on race day. But ultimately, again, I'm pleased I made this mistake in my first marathon. So there's a common theme here in the, marathon career that I've had, is that there's been mistakes, there's been shortcomings, and there's definitely been opportunities to learn, which I think really is what marathoning is all about. I can't think of any other athletes other than Eliud Kipchoge whose marathon running seems to be as consistent and as successful. I know that he had a bit of a compromised run in London a few years ago, but he's just got such a good marathon record. And to be honest, all the videos that I've watched on YouTube regarding, your first marathon, or even, how to prepare for your next marathon, there's always, an air of caution that is advised, but just regarding, things can go wrong really quickly if you don't take the right precautions. And even if you do, some things will just go wrong. But I will say that you can definitely set yourself up with, the best chances of things going right. And my number one piece of advice for you all that really I've gained from my 3 marathon experiences is just to put all of your testing into your training. So those long runs that you'll be doing in your marathon build, make sure that you're using that as an opportunity to test your hydration, whether you're going to be putting cups outside your house, and when you run by you're going to practice picking up those cups, or it might be water bottles. If you're using a personalized drink on the day, it might be that you set up a few of your individual drinks bottles and then you'll practice running by grabbing those at marathon pace. You might want to just practice what it's going to be like to run with 5 gels on your body. I personally like to use 5 gels, in my case MAURTEN, during my marathon efforts. And actually running with those on your body is a little bit more of a task than running with 1 or 2 in your pockets. You might also want to practice what it's like to wear sunglasses while you run, or a hat, or just in general pick up a vest. It might be a new vest or a vest you already have, and just make sure that you're not going to get any chafing on the nipples, etc., because bleeding nipples are no fun, around your armpits, everywhere like that. Are you going to wear your vest tucked in on the day or tucked out? These sort of things are really worthwhile testing, because honestly, those cramps that I had in Melbourne, I couldn't for the life of me work it out. What is going on here? Why am I getting these issues? I've never had these before. And then I just twisted my shorts just to, arrange them slightly differently, and the pain completely went away. I didn't realise that actually my shorts were compressing my belly and my gut. Again, I should have figured this out in training, but quite honestly, my training blocks this year have been sporadic. My build for Brighton was only 10 weeks. I know that wasn't enough training looking back, but it was my debut and I thought that's all it would take. My second training block for Adelaide, I had 5 months, but unfortunately I was dealing with injuries throughout that whole block. I just hadn't recovered well enough from Brighton, and I just didn't know my body well enough to know that I was actually struggling with some really weak hips, as well as some really tight glutes, hamstrings. There was just a whole lot I needed to learn there. And then my last marathon build for Melbourne was literally 6 weeks long. 2 weeks of that was recovering from Adelaide. 2 weeks of that was getting ready for my half marathon, and then 2 weeks of that was tapering. So it was literally 6 weeks of no marathon training, I guess just maintenance and recovery, and somehow I managed to run a PB. I'm not sure what happened there, but I will say that going into my next marathon in February, which is about 19 weeks away now, I do know that I need to just be bang on it with my training. Fortunately, this time around I do have a coach that will be able to help me obviously plan out my weeks in advance to help me stay motivated, but also coach knows what's best, and actually I've got someone to trust now, and there's not going to be that doubt in my head that actually am I overtraining, am I undertraining. Of course this could still be present, but at least I've got someone to bounce those ideas off if I am feeling that way. So just to round up this video, I thought it'd be interesting to just revisit a quote I made earlier in this video, and that is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Basically meaning, I found that those split shorts that I wore in the Adelaide Marathon worked really well for me, had no issues. And I decided to wear the half tights in Melbourne. You know, that really breaks my rule. I really need to stay with those split shorts. I know what works for me. Looking back, it might have been a mistake wearing those half tights in Melbourne. But actually, I think there's a really important point to this, and that is, don't be scared of making changes. But of course, number one, practice this in training. I think that it's really important to try new things. I really do. I think to gain new experience, diversify your knowledge, and just in general, the excitement that comes with doing something a little bit different. In my case, I've trained with SIS gels, Science in Sport, throughout my Brighton Marathon training block. I used Winners here in Australia, quite a common brand. I used those in the build up to Adelaide, and then for the Melbourne Marathon I used MAURTEN gels. I have to say personally that MAURTEN gels have been my favourite. I felt such an energy kick, and the caffeine gel at the end of the Melbourne Marathon did wonders for me. I actually gave one of these gels to my dear friend Jacob. Jacob made both the animation and the music in the intro to my videos. I gave Jacob one of my MAURTEN caffeine gels at the end of the Melbourne Marathon for him to go and try in his own time, and I asked him to send me a video of his first taste reaction. Here that is.
Here it goes. What the fuck?
But ultimately, I'm so happy that I've experimented with hydration and nutrition, because had I stuck with Science in Sport, I might have never actually known what it was like to use a gel like Winners, which is really high sodium and a slightly different viscosity. I did like it, but I have to say that using MAURTEN, again, a completely different viscosity and texture and taste, I really do know that MAURTEN is best for me. It's definitely worth the price. So I would love to hear from you guys. What have you learned in your first marathon experience, or first few for that matter? But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Find gratitude, find peace, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one. You say goodbye, Jubes? She says bye.